let's segue over to some fantasy football questions. Who are your top 3 underrated fantasy football players this season?
Okay, so I'm going to start it with a receiver.
Okay.
And call me crazy. I don't care. I really don't. My first guy I would say is the top 3 underrated player for this year. Would be Russell Gage, going to the Buccaneers. He was on a very bad Falcons team. The Falcons then lost Calvin Ridley to the whole year, and the Falcons were left with Matt Ryan, a absolute crap of an offensive line, and somewhat of an okay running back, and then you had a couple of good receivers here and there, and Russell Gage kind of emerged as one of a go-to player. And he was putting up good fantasy numbers. I remember I picked him up in a couple of my fantasy leagues, and he was really consistent. Could I always rely on him to get those 20 burgers? Not all the time, but he was pretty consistent. And so if I needed to, spot start him in certain leagues or certain times, I would put him in there. So, but now he's going to a Buccaneers team, and I know what everyone's thinking. Well, hold on. He's going against Julio Jones. He's going against Mike Evans. He's going to go against whoever's going to be the tight end. Who I don't know who's the number 1 tight end is going to be in Tampa Bay. It's always either O.J. Howard or Braid or whoever else. I don't know. But I think Russell Gage is going to emerge as the go-to guy because he is a slot receiver. Tom Brady is notorious for going to the slot receivers. He is a guy who has proven that on a bad team, he can be reliable. So when he's on a great team, he's going to be even that much more reliable. And then you have guys like Mike Evans, who everyone's always afraid of. I think Mike Evans is a little overrated in my opinion. I'm not going to go into it because it's not, what we're doing. But I think Mike Evans, Tom Brady doesn't necessarily trust him all that much. And, of course, Julio Jones coming in, he's going to probably trust Julio Jones, in my opinion, maybe a little more because Julio, when he is playing, he's one of the best receivers in the game. But unfortunately, he's just been riddled with injuries. Mike Evans, he hasn't been as dominant, in my opinion, as like a Julio Jones. So I feel like he's going to go Julio Jones. And even when he had Chris Godwin and Gronkowski, he really wasn't looking to Evans as much. My wife was when she was drafting in one of our leagues, she was like, "Oh, should I get Mike Evans?" And I was like, "I wouldn't." He'll have like 3 games where he's getting like 26 points, and you're like, "Oh my god, this is great." And then he's going to have 5 games where he's getting maybe 5 points, and you're like, "What the heck?" And so to me is a lot of high and low. He's not really like consistent enough for me. And I think that's where Russell Gage is going to come in. He's going to be the consistent guy. He's going to be the go-to receiver when they're on a 3rd and 5, it's going to be Russell Gage. When they're on a 3rd and 8, I feel like it's going to be more Russell Gage. The longer downs where it's like a 3rd and 10, 3rd and 15 something, then I think you're going to see more Evans or Julio Jones if Julio Jones can stay healthy. But even if he can, I still believe in Russell Gage. So to me, Russell Gage would be my first underrated player this season.
Gotcha. I think my first underrated player I would say is Matt Ryan. I don't know if that's really underrated, but I would say like if you're looking to, kind of wait out in the later rounds to get a quarterback, I think Matt Ryan is probably a really good choice. He didn't have the greatest season in Atlanta, but he still, had some fantasy upside slightly. But I think he's in a better situation, better offensive line. I think his weapons are a little younger, and they've been together for a while. And now that I think this is the 3rd season in the Frank Reich regime, I think these young receivers will have a pretty good connection with Matt Ryan, and also too that Indianapolis Colts defense will really help keep leads, and they won't let things get too out of control like Atlanta did, unfortunately. So I would actually say that Matt Ryan is a pretty solid quarterback choice, or at least to have as a backup, maybe a matchup starter type of sense. I would say that he would be my first underrated player.
All right. So my number 2 underrated player, I'm going to go with the running back in this one. This, to me, I kind of debated on whether I should put him just because he is on the Los Angeles Rams team, but I went with Cam Akers. And the reason I'm saying that is I feel like it is really misunderstood of how good he was really playing. He was still injured in the Super Bowl, like he wasn't 100% healthy. I know the cliche, please spare me with this, with the whole everyone's hurt at the Super Bowl. Everyone's hurt at this time. Okay, well, this guy was going through a major injury, okay, is what I'm trying to get at. But the other thing is, Matthew Stafford with the whole elbow injury, it could be a Tommy John type situation that he has. We don't know. Like the Rams are kind of being semi-quiet about it. But I feel like with that, you're going to see a lot of Cam Akers with the Rams, at least early on in the season. Later in the season, depending on where they are, that's going to determine whether they're going to have to pass more or run more. But I do feel like Sean McVay really relies on his running backs early and then tries to let the quarterback kind of get into a groove going into the playoffs. But Cam Akers not only is a good running back, but he is a guy who can catch the ball out of the backfield, and he's good at it. And he can put up points that way as well. So for me, underrated, in my opinion. I don't feel like it's being talked about. We're talking about Allen Robinson. We're talking about Matthew Stafford. We're talking about, potentially OBJ, Cooper Kupp, of course.
Yeah.
Guys like that. We're not really bringing up Cam Akers, who was somewhat of a star in the Super Bowl. I know that could be controversy too, but he came up big in a lot of situations in the Super Bowl, and Cam Akers to me is an underrated player. So Cam Akers, my second underrated player.
Okay. Well, I'll stick on the same running back theme, and I'll actually go with our Las Vegas Raiders. And I'm going to say that I think an underrated player that people should probably stash is actually Samir White. He got a lot of touches in preseason. He's gotten a lot of reviews out of Raiders camp. We got him in the 4th round out of Georgia, and he's a power runner. He's got a lot of speed, pretty good hands. And I'm also, and this is kind of like a foreshadowing to one of our Drew Take questions. I wouldn't be surprised if he takes over the second rotation in the running back, depth chart, or even be starter at some points, just because I think that Josh McDaniels and the Raiders really love Samir White to the point to where, don't be surprised if he ends up being the starter. Josh Jacobs sometimes has health issues. He remained fairly healthy majority of last season, but he has missed some games for injury. Kenyon Drake is coming off of a pretty big injury, and so he will need some time to recover. But I think Samir White is a player that people think about stashing him. You never know. He'll probably have some pretty good games. And that Raiders O-line, even though it's a little bit banged up, that zone blocking scheme that they've instilled looked really good in the first preseason. And again, it's preseason, so we're going to taper expectations. But just the fact of that culture, that offense, it's on another level than what we're used to. And so I would say Samir White is somebody to keep an eye on.
Yeah, kudos to you, because Samir White is going to be the James White, James White, obviously, who just retired, but Samir White is going to be the James White in this offense, because Josh McDaniels, obviously coming from New England, he's going to want to keep that similar system because it has worked. And I think you could say that Josh Jacobs has gotten better at pass catching, but I think you'd rather have him run the football, because when he's running the football, he is just dangerous. Yeah. And that way you can throw in another guy who is a pass catcher. That is originally why they got Kenyon Drake. And to your credit, of course, he did get hurt late in the year, so we don't know when he's actually going to come back. I mean, it kind of seems like he may come back early in the year, but still, Samir White is a really good rookie. He's a young guy. He's coming out of Georgia, who had like a four rotation running back system going. So obviously, I followed a lot of Georgia running backs this year because one of the guys actually came from Buchanan High School, which is right down the street from us here in Fresno. So he's a local boy who's now he's going to be like number 1, number 2 on the depth chart this year, which watch some Georgia football. He's a good running back. Anyway, Kendall Milton, if you're interested. Anyway, so Samir White is a guy who he's going to be the priority for him in this offense this year is going to be pass catching. So I think you're absolutely on to something there. But I would have to say temper expectations a little bit if you are going to stash him, because it would either, if he's going to get a few more run plays, Josh Jacobs is going to have to be hurt, or Kenny Drake is going to have to be, out for a little while. So if not, then they're going to just kind of use Josh Jacobs a little bit more.
Gotcha. All right. Who's your third underrated player?
Third and final guy, I had to go with the quarterback situation, and I'm going to stick with the Raider theme. I'm going with Derek Carr.
He's underrated? You think
he
so?
is underrated because exactly what Colin Cowherd had to say this year, or this week, was there's like being put as number 12, number 13. Not only did he beat the Chargers to go into the playoffs, and everyone talking about Justin Herbert, he's making all these incredible throws. Look at Herbert here. Look at Herbert there. Oh, if only they had a defense. Can we talk about Derek Carr in that game too? Give me a break, guys.
Yeah.
Derek Carr lost his best receiver and Henry Ruggs. Henry Ruggs was finally emerging as the guy that we thought he was going to be last year. Mm-hmm. He came out in this year and he was absolutely balling, and unfortunately got in trouble and probably won't see the light of day, unfortunately. But, then they had to go with a hurt Darren Waller all year long. He could not stay healthy. Then the offensive line was really beat up last year. Yeah. Josh Jacobs was beat up. Kenyon Drake went down. I mean, Hunter Renfrow was really the only receiver we had that was actually healthy. Zay Jones was a nice compliment to Renfrow and was making a few plays where you had to kind of keep him honest. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, Derek Carr had to find ways to win. And what did he do? He found ways to win. Yeah. Now you've upgraded him. You've gotten the best receiver in football in Devontae Adams, the best slot receiver in football. Yes, I said that right. Hunter Renfrow, in my opinion, number 2, number 3 best tight end in the NFL in Darren Waller. And then the offensive line is looking like it could be beat up a little bit. But now you're adding, yes, Josh Jacobs, as you mentioned, Samir White. When Kenyon Drake comes back, you're giving so many weapons. And in my opinion, I feel like we've gotten better on defense. I think a lot of people are underrating it because they're like, well, it's a lot of no-name guys. But Devontae Adams, Darren Waller, Hunter Renfrow, all these guys who are seeing Nate Hobbs on the other side, they're praising this guy. They're like, this guy is phenomenal. He's going to be a problem in the league. And he was a problem last year. I mean, he came up a lot.
He's probably one of our best defenders.
Yeah. And so I think this defense is getting underrated. But anyway, Derek Carr, I think, yes, he is being underrated because a lot of people are like, oh, he only threw 23 touchdowns and 14 picks. It's not a great touchdown to interception ratio. Look at what he went through. Yeah. I mean, come on now. So when you talk about Derek Carr this year, I'm going to put it down now. I think this is going to be Derek Carr's first 30 touchdown year. And I don't think it's going to be even kind of close. I think he's going to have it by like week 15.
Mm-hmm. That's a good one. Derek Carr's our guy, so I'm actually surprised that you're categorizing him as underrated, but I think that's because us as being Raider fans, we see what he's done, and everyone in the league recognizes him as a good player and as a good quarterback, and it's those that are on the outside that don't think they see it. But with all that he's gone through, I think Colin Cowherd pointed out best, in 8 years he's gone through 6 OCs, 3 head coaches. It's some weird number, and yet he's mastered all the systems, and he still makes the Raiders competitive. So definitely something there. My third and final one, this is actually so these questions were kind of inspired by my cousin Nick. Drew, as you know, he's a fan of the show.
Nick.
AKA Xbox Dad 559. He basically asked us to do some fantasy content, which is what I texted you about. So my third and underrated player, this is for you, Nick. Jerry Jeudy. I think is a wide receiver people should think about drafting, with Russell Wilson now being their primary quarterback. Obviously, that's a huge upgrade, and the Broncos are going to be a threat in the AFC West, no doubt. They have a really good defense with a probably top 5 secondary in the NFL on paper. Not to mention they still have Bradley Chubb that is dangerous on the outside. And then you add a quarterback like Russell Wilson, who I think will elevate this offense, and they have a offensive-minded head coach. And I think Jerry Jeudy and Russell Wilson will find that chemistry pretty early. And, you and I, Drew, back in, I think it was the draft of 2020 or 2019 when Jerry Jeudy and Henry Ruggs were both drafted. You and I actually wanted Jerry Jeudy over Ruggs at the time because we liked his route tree a lot more. We liked his speed. Even though Ruggs was faster, we still felt like, with the hands, the routes that Jerry Jeudy is able to do, we thought that was a better result than Henry Ruggs. I still think that Jerry Jeudy is going to be a pretty big wide receiving star once he finds a quarterback that can get him the ball, because his last 2 quarterbacks were Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater. So it's not, those quarterbacks aren't the greatest to help develop a young receiver that needs a good quarterback to be throwing him the ball. So I think that Jerry Jeudy is going to have a pretty good year coming up, and I think he's a breakout player, and I think he's underrated in this sense, because people are probably looking at Jerry Jeudy thinking that he's a potential bust, but I don't think people are thinking about the quarterbacks that he's had. He's getting a new offense that's more tailored towards, receiver friendly, as it came from the Packers organization. So I think Jerry Jeudy is an underrated player, and he's my third one in this topic.